Thank you for that introduction and thank you for the invitation. Yes, a little bit different in background here. Um, and I also acknowledge the people of the Wurundjeri people who are the traditional owners of the land that I may call home. I want you to meet Jane. Jane is an older women renter who lives alone in her Melbourne apartment. In winter, her flat is cold and moldy because she's got an ineffective heater, but she's too afraid to ask her landlord for a new heater. She's afraid that he may raise her rent. She's anxious about mounting energy bills, so she goes to bed early to keep warm. She hides her problems for family and friends out of embarrassment. Her home has become a trap of worry, social isolation, and a health risk. This vignette draws from our research, and it's not just me, it's a whole group of people from various disciplines with energy vulnerable householders to humanize how the housing affordability crisis and climate change mitigation efforts converge to affect mental health, not always on purpose. Jane's example spotlights raw emotions, chronic anxiety over high energy bills, and the risk of disconnection, shame, and pride in making do that mediate how homes shape our well-being. Today, I'll show you how our current low-carbon transition may reinforce social inequalities, which may be considered unfair, and how we could build caring systems that offer decent, affordable, and well-performing homes for all. We have to reduce household carbon emissions in Victoria, as they account for more than a third of the state's emission. This is because of largely energy inefficient homes, heavy reliance on gas, which is a fossil fuel, for heating, and predominant use of cars, petrol and diesel cars with internal combustion engines. But change is expensive. So the state and federal governments are offering incentives to improve the thermal performance of the home, electrification, rooftop solar PVs, electric cars, and information to promote energy efficient behaviors. Our systematic review found that home energy improvement, so new insulation, better efficiency appliances, can improve winter warmth for better cardiovascular and respiratory health, and cooler summer nights for better sleep. Increased satisfaction with the home is an important explanation for positive mental health outcomes, while financial considerations, because the energy bills may be lower, seem to play a secondary role. However, our realist review highlighted the contextual influences of the 28 residential energy efficiency interventions that we reviewed on health outcomes. Common target populations were low-income households, children, and the elderly, who may have been particularly grateful for free home improvements. People's expectations and culturally constructed heating practices influenced indoor temperatures and householder satisfaction. Very deprived households were still affected by financial constraints despite the intervention measures. A lack of technical mastery of new technologies counteracted the beneficial effects of the intervention measures. In addition, the review exposed that poor workmanship and ineffective handover of these new technologies undermined energy conservation objectives and led to householder dissatisfaction. So much of our research, therefore, addresses the low-carbon housing transition as a socio-technical intervention. Rather than just looking at the material upgrades, we try to learn from social practices of energy use in these households and lived experiences to give voice to the householders and their understanding of energy and meanings of home, and critically reflect on policies. So we know that current home energy improvement initiatives often exacerbate social inequalities, which may be interpreted as unfair. Australia leads the world on rooftop solar adoption, but not everyone can join the clean energy revolution. Almost 3.5 million renters and apartment dwellers and households in embedded networks experience structural disadvantage and have limited access to the benefits of solar power. So that's almost a third of all Australian households. And these households face a triple financial burden. They have a relatively low income, limited access to free solar electricity. They are often reluctant to ask for energy assistance, but they share the financial costs of the grid decarbonisation, the home electrification programs like the Victorian Energy Upgrade Program, and the gas infrastructure, because they are the ones remaining on gas because they can't afford to switch to all electric homes, and then they bear the costs of the stranded infrastructure. Current schemes also often misrecognize how people make decisions about their home. So, for example, how people pay for home improvements, a lot of people want to avoid credit. How to find willing and trustworthy tradespersons. So, for example, women who've had bad experiences with tradespeople in the past won't let strangers into their house again. Skepticism about government incentives, but also little understanding of energy performance of homes. So if we ask, tell me about the energy efficiency of the home, we get to hear, oh, my neighbor's got solar panels, but I don't, rather than looking at insulation levels. And the timing of planned life in the home. So there's more resistance to change and retrofits when nearing the end of life of the householder themselves or of the dwelling. And there are also overlooked social challenges of electrification. So switching to electricity costs money, new appliances, heater, stove, new hot water systems. There's need for structural changes, new wall openings, new ducted radiators, gas abandonment changes. And there are peak demand tariffs. So people with limited flexibility may be disadvantaged, and obviously the smart appliances cost more money. But even heat pumps, they are disruptive during the installation, they create noise. There's space requirements, so if you have a heat pump on your balcony, it's not really very useful on a hot summer day to use the balcony. And then the retrofits of reverse cycle air conditioning as well. So if you're living in an uninsulated home, it can actually create discomfort because it creates a draft in the home. And filters need to be cleaned. Who's going to get up on the ladder to clean those? And there are cooking practices. So, for example, Indian households are very attached to their gas cooking appliances. Access to electric cars and charging points is also subsidized, but may also be unequal and equitable. Apartment residents who may already be disadvantaged in income and control over the environment may have to queue for long hours to use the paid public charging stations. Their wealthier neighbors enjoys a private home charger, possibly with access to free solar energy from the roof. This seems unfair as it worsens existing housing inequalities. Other injustices in the home decarbonisation may be because of limited digital abilities, language barriers, and gentrification when housing improvements displace current householders, then, leading to a housing precarity. So these examples show that if we prioritize technical performance and environmental outcomes over social impacts, we leave people like Jane behind. But a low carbon transition is a moment of disruption, and every moment of disruption is really an opportunity to improve social equality. So our collaborative work on energy disadvantage suggests that interdisciplinary strategies can bring about more equitable outcomes and promote a just transition where low carbon homes foster autonomy, belonging, and mental flourishing. So, for example, Jane could get help through her carer, through the in-home care service providers. We need targeted interventions, so means testing, and not just income, but also wealth. So Victoria's rooftop solar and battery programs for the first time look at the wealth, the value of the home, to address the unevenness in financial capacities. We should prioritize low carbon refurbishment of rental properties, and that plays into minimum energy efficiency standards. We should also train people who are unemployed or from a disadvantaged background, so often called social procurement, to enhance their personal professional opportunities in life and help reach hardly reached households. We could encourage and support women in retrofit skills training to promote women's equality and help reach female households, making them feel safe and respected when retrofitting. And we could prioritize accessible public resources like physical, not the digital, one-stop shops to empower householders and enhance the democratization of home energy improvements. And we need interdisciplinary strategies. For example, when we do the home assessments in the NDIS or in the My Aged Care or maternal and child care services, we go into homes, we see the homes, or service providers tell us they see the homes, they recognize the disadvantage, but they don't know how to refer people to help because often there isn't even a body that can help them. We can engage trusted intermediaries like health and community services and housing providers to identify hidden energy poverty. So those are people who are really hiding their disadvantage. And banks could offer financial and practical support for low carbon refurbishments and reward low carbon improvements, for example, through lower mortgage rates. And European banks are starting to do that.